is Audible.
Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Gods and Demons by B.R. Kingsolver. Narrated by Rachel Delude. Gods and Demons. Chapter 1. A woman walking home late at night has a choice. She can either walk in the light and hope people will help her if she has any trouble, or she can walk in the shadows and hope no one sees her. I figured no woman in her right mind walked through dark streets at night, so the predators should be looking elsewhere. Of course, it didn't require an IQ test to become a criminal, or a rogue werewolf with robbery or rape on his mind. Maybe I needed to reevaluate my state of mind and my decision-making processes. 3 werewolves in their human forms stepped out of the shadows. A quick glance over my shoulder showed 2 more behind me. Under the circumstances, I didn't think their intentions were honorable. My sword whispered out of its sheath almost soundlessly, but I was sure the wares heard it. I didn't think I could take 5 wares with only a sword, but mostly I hoped it would distract them. I surreptitiously sketched a rune with my other hand and spoke a word under my breath. A wild animal roared, filling the alley with a heart-stopping sound, and then the world caved in on the wares standing in front of me. A dark shape fell from a roof to my right, landing on 2 of the wares and knocking the 3rd one against the far wall. The shape resolved itself as an animal of some sort, maybe a large cat. Definitely a cat. It clawed the 2 men with all 4 feet. It bit one of the wares in the head. I heard bones crunch and he went limp. The 3rd man moved toward it, with something in his hand. The cat slapped him. His head swiveled on its neck, and I noted that as he fell, his face continued to look over his shoulder. The cat bit the 2nd wearer's head and then turned to look at me. The entire fight took only a few seconds. I shook myself out of my shock and spun to face the wares behind me. They stood frozen, but I guess my movement caught their attention. Proving they weren't complete fools, both turned and ran. I was tempted to send the spell I held after them, but I knew I wasn't alone in the alley. I turned back and discovered the cat was gone. A woman walked toward me. She stood no taller than my chest and appeared to be a full-figured Mexican peasant woman, similar to many of the hotel maids in the city, dressed in blue jeans, a loose white blouse, and a khaki jacket. She had dark skin, a Mayan nose, and her dark hair hung down her back in a braid as thick as my wrist. I shouldn't have been able to see her eyes in the dark, but a thin ring of yellow surrounded her dilated pupils. "Didn't your mama tell you not to walk down dark alleys at night?" she asked in a Spanish accent. My mother said a lot of things I should probably have paid attention to. I realized that I had seen her before, just an hour earlier at the club where I was listening to an Irish band. She had brushed against me at the bar when I was getting another beer. She chuckled. "Perhaps we should find somewhere else to talk," she said, "before anyone decides to ask questions." Without another word, she turned and started walking down the alley, stepping over and around the bodies of the wares she had killed. I sheathed my sword and followed her. I wasn't sure the sword would help me against a being that could turn 3 muggers into werewolf tartare without breaking a sweat. 2 of the wares were shredded, soaked in blood, and their skulls were crushed. The 3rd guy had a broken neck, and the side of his head and face were marked by 4 bone-deep slashes. Whatever my mysterious benefactor was, she was absolutely the baddest woman I had ever met. I hoped that I would wake up in the morning and discover she was only part of a weird dream. Or maybe she wasn't some kind of shifter. Maybe she was a mage and she'd called a demon or something. That thought didn't make me feel any better. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Home." "Okay, we need to talk." I stopped. The last thing I wanted to do was go anywhere with her. The whole scene in the alley was a horror show, and I just wanted to get as far away from it and her as I could. After a few steps, she realized I wasn't with her and turned. I tried to keep my hand from shaking as I held out my business card. "It's late, and I'm beat," I said. "Come by my office in the morning." She took the card and nodded. All right. Try to stay out of dark alleys. Buenas noches. I watched her walk away. She moved silently and with a sinuous grace that didn't seem to fit her build. I released the spell I'd been holding. Whether it would have stopped her or her familiar was something I wasn't eager to test. Not wanting to be followed to my house, I went to work rather than go home. I had a small cottage on the property where I lived when I first started the business. There was no chance of anyone invading it. The cottage was a bit rustic and cramped with only 3 rooms. I built it when I first bought the land, as I didn't have any money to rent an apartment. It didn't even have heat or electricity the first few years. I just spelled light and heat. My landscaping business covered 18 acres of prime real estate near American University. I couldn't afford such a land at current prices, as evidenced by some of the eye-popping offers I had recently received. But it was fairly cheap when I bought it 45 years before. There wasn't any way I could find enough land for a nursery close to DC if I sold it. As I walked past one of the 4 oaks that anchored the corners of the property, a fairy swooped down and landed on my shoulder. She chattered in my ear, mostly about a neighbour's dog, while I unlocked the gate and let myself in. I hoped that my fairy nest buried the evidence if they decided to deal with the offending animal. Fred and Kate, my garden gnomes, had already gone to bed, and no light shone from the windows of their mound. When I entered the cottage, it smelled a little musty, and I opened a couple of windows to let it air out. I hadn't stayed there in a while. After a quick shower, I snuggled under the covers in a bed that felt comfortingly familiar. My crews showed up at 6 in the morning. I didn't need to get up, but I rolled out of bed anyway. Looking out the window, I saw that my foreman, Ed Gillespie, had everything under control. He handed out work orders, helped the crews load up the plants and the equipment each would need, and set them out the gate. After a quick shower, I showed up with a cup of tea and watched. "Hey, sleepyhead," Ed called. "Late night and didn't make it home? Did you get any?" Various crew members called out greetings. The feeling was familiar and comfortable, and I needed it after the horror of the night before. I realized that I must have been in shock after witnessing that slaughter. It was a wonder I didn't run screaming from whatever it was that wore the form of a woman. For 40 years, I had done all the mind-numbing paperwork, accounting, phone calls, and routine work. I was glad to pass as much of it as I could to Maureen, my office manager, Kathy, my accountant, and Ed. I still had to sign the checks and contracts and other things. I was finishing up the morning's necessary paperwork and had almost forgotten the previous night's events when the woman from the alley walked through my office door at 9 o'clock. She sat in one of the chairs in front of my desk and looked around. I judged her to be older than I originally thought. Somewhere in her 40s, maybe. "Nice place. Landscape architect. Makes sense. You don't look any the worse for wear from last night," she said. "I didn't do anything last night. Look, I'm grateful for your help, but I don't get involved with the paranormal community. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." Well, then I'll state my business quickly," she said. "I need an elf, or a very strong witch with very specialized skills. An elf would be better, especially a realm walker." I didn't bother to ask why she was talking to me about elves, but rather stared at her. My shock from the night before returned, and I felt numb. "Kelana Rogir's daughter," the woman said, reading my card that she held. "Sounds almost Icelandic." She turned her face up to me. "What is it really?" "Kelana Aptharogir," I said. "And you're from Alfheim?" "Midgard." I tried to shake myself out of my daze. "I'm not a realm walker." "Oh, and how did you get here?" I felt almost hypnotized, staring into her yellow eyes. "I came here with a realm walker," I said. "A less than honourable man." Why did I say that last part? She had me completely unsettled. She raised an eyebrow. "And he abandoned you here?" "After a manner of speaking, he died." Alaric was handsome, exciting, and full of wild ideas and promises. He decided that we should come to Earth, a realm with little magic, and get rich. Realm walkers were the most successful thieves imaginable. I was young and dumb, and although his plan made me uncomfortable, his kisses and his hands drove me wild and jumbled any thoughts in my silly head. He walked us into the realm of Earth at a place called Dresden on February 14, 1945. If he hadn't been standing in front of me, the bomb would have killed me too. When I picked myself up, I found I had come to the place humans called Hill. I shook myself out of my reverie. I don't think I can help you. She breathed a deep sigh. I am looking for an artifact, a portal. I know who had it, and I followed him here to Washington. But he's dead, and he didn't have the artifact when I found his body. I still don't understand how you think I can help, Miss Isabella Cortez. Dr. Isabella Cortez. I can't feel the artifact, Sel Kilana. You see, I don't have any magic. An elf could detect it, I hope, as could certain types of witches or mages. Human mages might feel it, but I think a mage from another realm might have better luck. I shrugged. An artifact that's a portal? I don't think I've ever heard of such a thing, and I'm not a mage. I stood. I wish you luck, Dr. Cortez. Thank you for last night, but I have work to do. I thought she was going to be difficult, but she shook my hand, gave me her business card, and graciously departed. My talents didn't include precognition, but it didn't take a soothsayer for me to suspect I hadn't seen the last of her. It was only after she left that I wondered how she knew I was an elf, and knew enough about elves to use the Sel honorific in addressing me. Of course, for so many years, humans considered the possibility of other races as fantasies. Lately, they were more apt to wonder about my humanity. My afternoon appointment in Chevy Chase involved the type of work I enjoyed. A couple had recently bought a house. As was often the case, the lawns and gardens had once been nice, but age and neglect had left them in a pitiful state. The woman I met with wanted a showplace, a beautiful garden to match her large, fancy house. I soon learned that she wasn't a gardener and wanted the landscaping only to look at. She had no intention of ever getting her hands dirty by taking care of it. So, I needed to come up with an eye-popping design with some unusual elements to wow her friends, and an ongoing maintenance contract to keep my crews busy. I heard the cash register in my head ring repeatedly as I walked around the place, sketching and taking notes. After promising that I would have a design for her the following week, I got in my pickup and backed out of her driveway. No traffic, just a car parked down the street. Glancing in my rear-view mirror while I drove off, I saw the car pull away from the curb and follow me. I didn't think anything about it until I was about halfway back to the nursery. The car was still following me. I drove into a fast food place and bought a milkshake. When I pulled out again, the car soon reappeared behind me. Since I led a fairly low-key lifestyle and no one knew I was an elf, such an occurrence was unusual. The type of run-in I had the previous night was rare, though more common in the past couple of years. 2 years before, on Beltane when the veils between realms were thinnest, celestial alignments led to the veils thinning to the point of rupture. Rumour was that vampires hired a demon to actually cause the rupture, but other rumours said werewolves hired a realm walker. No matter the cause, creatures from other realms flooded into Earth's realm, including thousands of vampires and wares. Demons rampaged on the Capitol Mall and even invaded the halls of Congress. Werewolves created a crisis in London. Humanity's long denial of the supernatural shattered overnight. The Chinese used nuclear weapons against an invasion of demons and shredded the veils. Even beings without magic walked between realms, and 2 years later, the veils remained fragile. As the awareness of paranormal beings and witchcraft spread, rioting broke out in many places. Witches or suspected witches and other non-humans were persecuted and murdered in many places. The magic users and non-humans fought back. Martial law was declared in all or part of 7 southern states in the U.S., and China reverted to savage barbarism in an ongoing war against demons. In other places, mages and witches began practicing magic publicly. Vampires opened nightclubs to prey on starry-eyed college girls, and TV reality shows became circus-like extravaganzas. When Samhain came 6 months later, it became evident that Earth wasn't the only realm affected. All the realms descended into chaos. Enough elves, refugees from strife in Alheim and Midgard, settled in Iceland to start their own political party. I had met 2 other elves in my first 70 years on Earth, but suddenly there were thousands of us living openly throughout the world. But having 2 men in a black Mercedes follow me around was a first. Since I was driving a pickup truck with my business logo that said Fairyland Landscape Design and Maintenance on the doors and tailgate, it seemed silly to try and lose them, so I drove back to the nursery. Driving through the gate, I saw the fairies out among the flower beds, and that made me think of Isabella Cortez. Any non-humans entering my land would draw the fairies out in full battle mode to defend their territory, but Cortez didn't attract their notice. Very curious. My followers didn't try to enter after me, but drove on past. Chapter 2. I considered spending another night at the cottage, but I didn't have any clothes or food there. Making a note to remedy those things, I decided to brave the wild streets of Washington and go home. The wards on my house in Georgetown were as strong as the ones on the nursery, though they weren't anchored by the oak trees, and the house didn't have the fairies for watchmen. After dark settled, I jumped over the fence into the park that bordered my land on the opposite side from the gate into the nursery. Wearing a black ankle-length cloak with a hood and using a glamour to blur my image, I checked around the corner. The Mercedes was still there. All elves had the ability to shrink to a more fey-like size, but rarely used it. My teacher said it was a vestigial evolutionary trait. Some said the elves had once been only as small as the rest of the fey. No one had ever answered me when I asked if we had wings then. I didn't want the men in the Mercedes following me home, so I shrunk to my 12-inch size and snuck by the car, keeping to the little bit of shadow on the street. Once I was past the car and it was out of sight, I changed back to my normal size. It was only a little over 2 miles from my business to my house, and I could walk through Glover Archbold Park most of the way. Years before, it was usually full of Tristan college students at night, but more liberal dorm room policies changed that. High school kids had taken over that function in the park's ecosystem. And since the Beltane catastrophe, there were predators. A girl couldn't even go for a walk by the river without being accosted by vampires, imps, incubi, and the goddess alone knew what might be next. Werewolves hunting squirrels and rabbits, and occasionally girls, were a constant irritant. The park was part of the National Park System, so the DC police didn't patrol the area. But the park police were more focused on ticketing people for littering than preventing assaults. So it didn't surprise me when an imp leaped from a tree, hit me in the back and grabbing the shoulder strap of my bag. If I had been a human, he might have gotten away with his theft. But I was already holding the strap, so the snatch and run didn't go off the way the imp had expected. Although staggered, I managed to keep my feet. Holding onto the strap, I pulled the bag out of the imp's grasp and backhanded him. The imp flew across the trail and slammed into a tree trunk. The impact didn't seem to faze him. Giggling hysterically, he bounced up and dodged around me, trying to grab the bag again. He came within reach of my legs and I punted him 30 feet down the trail, where he landed and rolled head over heels until hitting another tree. That gave me time to draw my sword.
"Nasty elf,"
he said, springing to his feet.
"You have so much and I have so little. Give me the bag and I will forgive you for hitting me."
The imp closed half the distance between us before he saw the gleaming sword and skidded to a stop.
"Bad elf,"
the imp gibbered.
"Only a game. You would kill for a stupid bag."
"No, I would kill you because you're rude," I replied.
"Ugly elf," he spat. "Hope you never mate. Die all alone and worms eat your eyes."
Imps were loved only by other imps, and for good reason. I sketched a rune in the air and spoke a word.
"No!"
the imp's cry cut off when he disappeared. I let my sword slide back into its sheath and continued on my way. I had used the banishment spell so many times since the veils between the realms shredded that I didn't have to think about it anymore. It worked remarkably well on lesser demons and occasionally on minor demons. Luckily, I hadn't faced any major or grand demons. That the imp wanted my bag wasn't a surprise. They were thieves and pack rats, the crows of the paranormal world. And my bag would be quite a prize. The bag had been Alaric's, though I knew he stole it somewhere. Outwardly, it looked like a gaudily dyed reptile skin bag with a shoulder strap, but inside was a pocket dimension that would hold more than I could possibly carry without it. A powerful mage crafted the bag from dragon skin, and even in Alfheim, it would be wildly expensive. When I got home, I found another black Mercedes parked down the street, where the two men inside could watch my front door. I wondered when I had become so interesting. My lights were on a timer, similar to almost every house in the neighbourhood, as though thieves wouldn't break into a lit house. My wards were far more effective, though I didn't want to stand out. I unlocked the door, and as I turned the knob, something white fluttered down to the step by my feet. I picked it up and saw it was a business card. After a glass of wine to accompany stir-fried vegetables with shrimp, I picked up the card from the table in the foyer and looked at it. Abner Wilcox, Master Magician. Who in the hell was Abner Wilcox, and how did he and those creeps around the corner know where I lived? I decided that I did prefer sleeping where the fairies were on guard, so before I went to bed, I put together some clothes and food to stock the cottage the next day. That done, I went into my workshop to mix a few potions and store a few spells. I had discovered that paintball guns were a wonderful delivery mechanism for certain types of spells. I made up a large batch of paintballs, especially for nosy busybodies. The sky was starting to lighten in the east when I left the house the following morning. Landscaping crews started the day early, especially in Washington in the summer. It got too damn hot to work outside in the afternoon. The black car was still parked where it had been the night before. A car was a terribly uncomfortable place to spend the night, and I wondered if the men inside were the same ones. On an impulse, I walked up to the passenger side and rapped my knuckle against the window. The man inside startled, then looked at his partner. They exchanged a few words, and then the man near me rolled down his window part way. "I don't think we've been properly introduced," I said. "I'm Kalana, but I assume you know that, and you are." The inside of the car smelled like dog. The driver started the car and slammed it into gear. I raised my paintball gun and fired a round into the back seat before the window rolled up. With squealing tires, the car sped away. I watched as the interior filled with pink fumes. Half a block away, the car started swerving, then jumped the curb, hit a stop sign, and continued into the wall of a house. It made an awful racket. Lights came on in the surrounding houses, and a few people peeked out their windows or doors. Passing the Mercedes, I glanced inside it and saw both men lying unconscious, surrounded by a pink haze. Humming an elven merchant song, I headed off to work. Torturing the men parked by my house was so much fun that I decided to try it again with the men parked by the nursery. But when I tapped on their window, the passenger's door swung open, hitting me and knocking me backward. The man inside pulled himself out of the car and reached for me. The driver also opened his door and sprang out. Stumbling backward and trying to catch my balance, I fired a spell pellet at the ground between us. The werewolf blundered into the fumes, swayed, and crashed to the ground. His buddy didn't have much of a sense of humour. He drew a pistol and pointed it at me. "Hold it right there," he growled. "Don't move." That sounded like a bad idea. I dove to my left, hit the ground, and rolled. His gun fired, so I kept rolling, my cloak twisting around my body. The gun went off a second time. Afraid that the gunman might get it together enough to aim, I stopped. My arms were bound tightly to my body by the cloak, so I could neither reach into my bag nor sketch a rune. "Okay," I shouted. "Don't shoot." I fought to free my arms. The hood had twisted around my face and I couldn't see. Don't move, a voice near me said, and I froze. I waited for something to happen, then I heard a sound like a shovel hitting a rock. Son of a bitch, a familiar voice said. I fought free of the cloak and saw the driver lying face down. My friend Ed stepped over the werewolf and picked up the pistol. He had a shovel in his other hand.
Are you all right?
He asked me. Yeah, I think so. Ed looked at the two men.
Who are these clowns?
I don't know. They followed me yesterday and then hung around all night. I think they have some friends. Same make of car, same cheap suits, who were parked next to my house when I got home. I stood and looked around. It was very early, and I didn't see anyone on the street except my employees, staring wide-eyed at the men Ed and I had downed. Let's get them out of sight before someone calls the cops, I said. Ed's head whipped around.
You're not going to call the cops?
Not until I have a chance to chat with these gentlemen and find out what in the hell this is all about. Then we'll call the cops. Get a couple of wheelbarrows. Ed grinned. He sent 2 of our employees after the wheelbarrows, and we loaded the wares into them. Take them to the pump house, I said. One of the girls who worked for me approached. You're really a witch? She glanced at the faint pink stain on the ground where the one ware had lain. I chuckled. After a manner of speaking, I'm an alchemist. I dug out one of the red spell balls. Looks like a paintball, she said. That's right. I buy them empty and fill them with my own concoctions. These red ones are a sleepy gas. A magically infused sleepy gas. No need to go into the differences between witch magic and elf magic. Why is it pink? Ed asked as I walked over to the ware's car. I took the keys and locked the car doors. Ed had worked for me for 10 years and he was quite aware that I wasn't a normal human. It's special for he-men, I said. Ed snorted and the girl giggled. On the way to the pump house, I grabbed a handful of zip ties and bound the men's wrists and ankles, then strung 3 of the zip ties together. Dragging one of the men into a sitting position, I used the extra long tie around his neck to bind him to the water pipe. Then I did the same with the other man. Ed sent the crews out to their jobs and then came back. What's with the neckties? They're werewolves. If they shift, they might slip the ties on their hands and feet. Ed's eyes got a little larger and he nodded, but didn't say anything. Just watched me as I finished securing the wares. The guy with the knot on his head recovered consciousness first. I knew the other one would be out for at least a couple of hours. Hi, handsome, I said, kneeling down in front of the one who was awake. Care to tell me why you're following me around? Surely I'm not the prettiest girl in town. The wearer glared at me but didn't answer. I dug down in my bag and came out with my athame and a vial of silver dust. Ed, where do you suppose the most painful place to apply a little fire would be? I asked, holding the wearer's eyes with my own. Oh, hell, probably his balls, Ed said. Nope, I answered. Foreskin. I think I'll circumcise him, and then use this silver dust to cauterize the wound. I slipped the athame inside the man's belt and cut it. Next, I slid the knife inside his waistband and slit his pants open past his crotch. Will silver really kill a werewolf? Ed asked. Yeah, a silver bullet or an injection of silver into his vein would kill him. A little bit of silver sprinkled on a wound will probably cause his pee-pee to shrivel up and fall off, but it won't kill him. I jerked down the man's underwear, and he bucked, writhing around and fighting against his bindings. You crazy fucking bitch, he shouted. I put the point of the athame under his chin and pushed just enough to break the skin. Settle down, Fido. He stopped thrashing, his eyes wide, and stared at me. I knew the silver forged into the athame probably burned like crazy. Now, I believe I asked you a question, I said. You shot at me. You tried to kill me. If you think that I feel any empathy or mercy whatsoever for you, then you're delusional. I didn't try to kill you, I just wanted to scare you. Uh-huh. Just threaten me, huh? Yeah, just to make you stop and hold still. I see. Well, let me tell you a little secret. I don't threaten. I make promises, and I keep them. Ed knew about my ears, and other than the wearer, he was the only person present. I pushed my hair behind my ears so the wearer could see it. Either you answer my questions or I promise you I will cut off your foreskin and sprinkle silver dust on the wound. I had often been amused by earth myths about elves. Yes, elves were the epitome of tree-hugging environmentalists, but we weren't pacifists. Elves, dragons, demons, Aesir, and angels sat near the top of the predator-prey pyramid, one step below the gods and archdemons. I watched the wearer's eyes widen until I thought they were going to pop out of his head. He knew what an elf was. "I'm waiting," I said. "Why are you following me around?" "The Catwoman," he said. "She told you to follow me." I wiggled the athame a little. Find her, he babbled. "We need to find her." "And why did you want me to hold still? Isn't that why you said you shot at me?" I dropped the point of the knife down to touch his penis. "Take you to Mama, my boss." "And who is your boss?" "Harold Vance." I smiled. It must not have been very reassuring because he peed on himself. "Thank you, puppy." I turned to Ed. "Now we can call the police." We locked the wares in the pump house and walked back to the office. "Harold Vance?" Ed asked. "The guy with the big estate out in Silver Spring?" "Yep. Top alpha wolf in the mid-Atlantic area. Organised crime around here is controlled by the werewolves. And yes, we mow his lawn." I didn't call the DC police, though. I called the PCU, the Paranormal Crimes Unit of the FBI. It took them about an hour, but 5 men in suits showed up in 2 cars and a van that resembled an armoured car. A man with dark brown skin, short curly black hair, and a broad nose approached me and held out his identification card. "Miss Rogier's daughter? I'm Special Agent David Torbert at the PCU." I led him to the pump house and opened the door. "These 2 men followed me yesterday, staked out my business, and this morning they accosted me." I handed him the pistol. "That one there fired 2 shots at me. Either you take them or I'm going to use them to fertilize my monk's hood." Torbert chuckled. "Don't they also call that wolf's bane?" I grinned at him. "I think that would make it extra potent, but I've never tried it. All in the spirit of scientific inquiry, of course." "Well, in that case, I guess I better take them," he said. He turned and signaled for the rest of his men. They came to the pump house and I handed a pair of rose clippers to the first one as he stepped through the door. He looked at the clippers, then at the zip ties around the wearer's neck and grinned at me. After clipping the neck restraints, they carried the wares out and loaded them into the big van. "What happened to that one guy's pants?" Torbert asked. "He was in some distress. I loosened his clothing," I said. Torbert chuckled again. A lot of humans didn't get my sense of humor, but I found myself liking Agent Torbert. "I'm not going to ask whether his distress started before or after you loosened his clothing," he said. I walked him back to his car. It took a while, as he seemed interested in everything in the nursery. "I'm also not going to ask about what is going on here," Torbert said as he got in his car. He looked me up and down, taking in my 6'6" stature, green hair, and slit-pupiled eyes. "I'm aware that elves can't lie, but you're extremely adept at not talking about what you don't want to talk about." He handed me his card. "However, if you need any help, give me a call. I do appreciate that you respect our laws and didn't settle this yourself. Agent Torbert, I wish I knew what was going on." Chapter 3. Cortez's card still sat on my desk. I hadn't looked at it before. Dr. Isabella Cortez, Ph.D., Professor of Animal Behavior, University of Colorado. I dialed the number and she picked up on the 3rd ring. "Isabella Cortez." "This is Kalana Rogier's daughter," I said. "We need to talk." "I will try to get there today." I thought I detected some distress in Cortez's voice. "Things have gotten more interesting since I spoke with you yesterday." "That's an understatement. I'm being followed, and a werewolf took a shot at me this morning." "Oh, dear." She was silent for so long that I thought we had lost our connection. "Dr. Cortez?" "Yes, I'm still here. You have werewolves, and I seem to have a wizard problem." I took a deep breath and then asked, "What kind of wizard problem?" I appear to be stuck here. I've tried to leave, but I'm not having any luck. Before I could stop myself, my foolish mouth asked, "Do you need help? Would you like me to come and get you?" "That would be lovely. Do you know where the Smithsonian Castle Garden is? I'm sort of trapped in here by some kind of spell." "Are you under attack?" "Not actively, no, but I can't leave. There are invisible barriers blocking off all the exits. No one else is here, so maybe people can't come in either." "It's 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't think the museum is open yet," I said. "Hang on. I'll be there as soon as I can." I decided to take my old Honda instead of one of the business's pickups. Maybe I could be a little less conspicuous. I swung by my house on the way. My old workshop behind the cottage could still be used to make spells, but I had moved all my ingredients to the new shop in my Georgetown house. My grimoires were also there. A wrecker was in the process of towing the Mercedes away when I drove up to my house. The interior of the car was a lovely shade of pink that really didn't go with the black exterior. Once I got into my workshop, I pulled out both my grimoire and Carolyn's. I had inherited the book along with the house when she died. The problem with her book was that my magic wouldn't execute some of the human witch spells. But all of the potions, tonics, tinctures, poultices, and poisons did work. Carolyn had been my one real friend in the Earth realm. We met about the time I bought the land for the nursery. 20 years later, she invited me to share her house in Georgetown. She left me the house and a small trust fund to take care of the place when she died. Human lives were so short. Quickly searching for something that could break wards, I came across a very nasty and loud spell that worked in conjunction with a potion. I had to mix 2 different solutions, then combine them at the ward while chanting the spell. The only problem was I couldn't figure out from the description if the potion would simply dissolve the ward or take out a city block in an explosion. Moving along, I found an elven rune-based spell. I wasn't sure if my magic was strong enough to take out the ward. When I said I wasn't a mage, I was telling the truth. I was a witch, with the magic any elf had, plus a little more in some areas. I was a good alchemist, and I was strong in setting wards. I didn't have any experience at all in breaking them. It might be a stretch to say Isabella had saved my life in that alley. I was fairly confident I could have escaped the wares, but the fact remained that she had put herself on the line for me. I called Isabella back. To my relief, she answered. "Where is the wizard who trapped you?" I asked. "Have you seen him?" "Oh, yes, he's standing right outside the garden. He said that all I have to do is give him the artifact and he'll let me go." "Do you have it?" "No, I told him that, but he doesn't believe me. He thinks I know where it is." "Would you be upset if I killed him?" I asked. "I know the wards would dissolve if the mage who cast them died." "Not at all. I plan to do that at my earliest opportunity, but if you take care of the issue, I won't object. I've been here all night and I'm starting to get hungry." Stuffing my bow and quiver into my bag, I ran out to my car. I normally didn't carry the bow since the DC authorities frowned on hunting in the city. But I didn't want to get in a magic battle with a real mage, and I expected an objection if I tried to get within sword range. It took me some time to find a parking place near the Smithsonian Castle. Searching for a parking space was the city's most popular participation sport. There were only 3 outside entrances to the garden, plus the one from inside the building. All 3 had wooden barricades erected across the sidewalk with "garden closed" signs on them. I circled around until I saw a man standing by one of them. Then I called Isabella. I was 100 yards away, and he didn't even notice me. "Describe this mage who has you trapped," I said. "Young, mid-30s, dark hair. He's wearing blue jeans and a lighter blue shirt. Hazel eyes, small scar over his left brow." "I have no idea. I never got that close." "He has a pistol." I always forgot how poor human eyesight was. Assuming Isabella was some kind of human. I walked up to the man and asked, "Are you holding someone against their will?" That close, I could feel his magic. He was a mage, and there was a little chance I could break his ward, especially if he decided to stop me. He whirled about, keeping one hand in the pocket of his light jacket. It was almost 90 degrees. No one needed a jacket. "Who are you?" he asked. "I understand that you're holding someone prisoner in there." Pulling a pistol out of his pocket, he said, "You should mind your own business. Get the hell out of here." That didn't sound very friendly, but I figured I had tried. That was the second time someone had pulled a gun on me that morning, and it irritated the hell out of me. I did what he told me, walking away and crossing the mall to the other side. About 2/3 of the way to the street, I turned and looked back. There wasn't anyone close either to me or to the wizard. I knelt down next to my bag and slid the bow and an arrow out onto the ground. Taking a deep breath, I snatched them up, knocked the arrow, drew and loosed. He jerked, arched his back, and fell forward. "Isabella," I said into the phone. "Run. Use the Independence Avenue exit and turn left." I shoved the bow back into my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked away. I wondered if Agent Torbert would recognize an elven arrow. Circling around to Independence Avenue, I called Isabella again. We met on the street and hurried the 3 blocks to my car. Isabella looked tired, and I remembered her saying she was hungry. "So," I asked as we drove away, "how did that happen?" "He left a message at my hotel asking me to meet him. I got there and didn't find anyone, but I couldn't leave. I tried all night, but no matter what I did, I couldn't get out. He showed up this morning at dawn and tried to get me to tell him where the statue is." "Statue? You said you were looking for an artifact." "It's a small statue." A thought occurred to me. Was that Abner Wilcox? She shook her head. "No, why? Where did you hear that name? Who was it?" "He said his name was Georges Tremblay. He said he was partners with Carlton Weber, the man who brought the artifact to D.C. More names disconnected to anything. I had all kinds of questions running around in my head. Who was Abner Wilcox, and why did he leave his card at my house? How did he and the werewolves know where I lived? How did Isabella, or any of them, find me in the first place? Why were the werewolves following me around? Who was the woman sitting next to me? Danu Maird. I had just killed the man. One question bubbled out of my mind. "How did you know I'm an elf?" "I smelled you at the nightclub. I have met elves before. There's a community of them in Colorado. Humans don't smell like flowers no matter how much perfume they wear." I stopped the car at a grocery store and we both went in. I bought fresh fruit, vegetables, and fish. She bought beef. When we got to the nursery, I found my hibachi and started a fire in it. Cortez built the fire and threw a huge steak on the grill. A minute later, she flipped it, and as soon as that side seared, she pulled it off onto a platter, sat down at my table, and demolished it. I cooked my small fish longer than she cooked a steak 2 inches thick. Cats are obligate carnivores, so I decided I shouldn't have been surprised. She accepted a cup of coffee and watched me as I ate my meal. "I killed a man for you this morning. I think you owe me an explanation about this whole affair," I said. Cortez regarded me in silence, then gave a deep sigh. "I asked you to trust me, and you did. I guess the least I can do is return the favor." She proceeded to tell me a tale that most humans on Earth would never believe. But it wasn't the most fantastic story I'd ever heard. I personally had seen more incredible things during my trip through 180 realms with Alaric. Over 1,000 years before, the god Akan attempted to seduce Ishel, goddess of midwifery and war, called the Rainbow Goddess and the Jaguar Goddess. When she rejected him, he crafted a statue of a jaguar, cast with magic out of pure gold, and gave it to a great Mayan mage named Yash-Kukmo. The mage installed the statue in a secret room in the great temple of Tikal in Yucatan, and through an elaborate ritual involving human sacrifice, summoned Ishel. Akan knew that Ishel couldn't refuse to bed one who summoned her, and that was his revenge. But there was a glitch. Magic always seeks a balance. When Ishel appeared, so did the archdemon Camazotz, the death bat. Legend told that the Mayan practice of human sacrifice started as payment for Camazotz giving fire to the Maya. In a battle that lasted for days, Yash-Kukmo defeated the demon and banished him. As a reward, Ishel mated with him and bore him a son, then parted the veils and returned to her home. When the son grew up and became king, he carried out the ritual, called Ishel as his father had commanded. Again, Camazotz was also called, and when the mage king defeated the demon, Ishel mated with him and bore him a son. She mated with her son? I said. Yes, Isabella said, disgust showing on her face. There's a certain ick factor to the whole story. Incest, human sacrifice, murder, all the good stuff. I've studied tales of the gods, and they don't seem to have the same sense of morality as mortals. For hundreds of years, this pattern continued, and the Mayans prospered under the rule of strong mage kings. Then Tikal was defeated in battle by the rival city-state of Palenque. The great mage king Janab Pakal took the jaguar statue back to Palenque along with the secret of the ritual and the head of the Tikal king. But when Janab performed the ritual and called Ishel and Camazotz, Ishel was displeased that Janab had killed her son and lover. She refused to help Janab battle Camazotz. The demon was victorious and Janab was slain. Ishel then mated with Camazotz but spited him by producing a daughter instead of a son. Without the blessings of a great mage king, Mayan civilization declined. Camazotz demanded more and more sacrifices and then called a drought upon Yucatan. The Aztecs and other barbarians soon reduced the Mayans to a subjugated people. Carlton Weber found the secret room beneath the Palenque temple and smuggled the statue out of Mexico. Isabella said, I knew something had happened there, but I arrived too late. I followed him here to D.C., where he had put the statue up for auction on the internet. When I finally tracked him down, he was dead, his home ransacked, and there was no sign of the statue. I thought you said you couldn't feel the statue. That's why you needed an elf. Isabella blushed and ducked her head. When she looked back up at me, she said, I can't feel the statue. What I can feel is that room in Palenque. It hasn't changed in 1,200 years. I didn't even know I could feel it until Weber opened the room and took the statue. My mind sort of fogged as I tried to sort that out. Elves are exceptionally long-lived, commonly live in 1,000 years, so a being living that long wasn't what stunned me. You're the daughter, I blurted out. Yes, I'm Ishel's daughter. The daughter of a goddess and an archdemon, a shapeshifter. But you say you have no magic. You are magic. Well, yes, I guess you might say so. I have abilities beyond shifting, but they aren't magic, at least not in the way magic is usually defined. Do you consider your connection to plants and the earth magical? No, of course not. But I use what some call elven magic to shape plants and manipulate them. And I have certain powers, but they don't involve magic. I channel the goddess's will and power. Ah, I see. And I did. Isabella asked the goddess to lend her power, and the goddess could say no. That was different than magic, which bent the natural world to the magician's will. But there was something Isabella didn't say. You said that Ishel is the goddess of midwifery and war. What are your powers? She licked her lips, then said, You don't want to see them. I'll just say that for the most part, shifting to my jaguar form allows me to handle most problems. I didn't want to push on something she didn't want to tell me. So I changed my line of questioning. If she didn't want to talk about her inheritance from her mother, I couldn't even imagine what she'd inherited from her father. You don't shift like a werecat, I said. Isabella shook her head. No, I don't have to go through all that. Wares tell me that changing is painful. I know that watching them change is painful. It takes 2 or 3 minutes, stretching and pulling, their bones and muscles rearranging into a completely different animal. But I don't shift the way wares do. It's almost instantaneous, morphing that takes less than 30 seconds. I don't change mass, and my cat is far sleeker than my human form. In the alley that night, I said, I got the impression that your cat is larger than the werecats I've known. The only cats larger than a jaguar are lions and tigers, Isabella said without elaboration. Another dead-end line of questioning. So you're afraid some mage will use the statue to lift the veils and bring this Camazotz into our world? She shook her head. Not really. I suppose it's possible, but I'm the only one who knows the ritual to call Ishel and Camazotz. And since I'm not a mage, performing the ritual would serve no purpose. Besides, eating human hearts isn't my thing. A mage might use the statue's power to summon other demons, I suppose, or create a portal to another realm. I don't know enough about that type of magic to understand what's involved. Isabella gazed out over the park next to the nursery. We could see a band of pixies hunting a beetle through the flowers on the other side of the fence. No, she finally said. The problem is that the statue stores magic. Enough magic to breach the veils and reach all the way into the upper realms of the gods and archdemons, and its use involves blood magic. What I'm afraid of is giving that much power to someone who would spill blood. A novice mistake might blow a hole a mile deep and as wide as half of Maryland and Virginia. An experienced and canny mage could probably set himself up as king. The fact is, it's an artifact of the gods and doesn't belong in this reality. Chapter 4. While I had my reservations about working with Isabella, it was obvious that simply being associated with her, however tenuously, had made me a target. That being the case, having her to watch my back made sense. On the other hand, I wasn't crazy about having her in my house and making it a target too. My Georgetown neighbourhood was much too quiet and full of snoops and gossips to abide any more scenes such as the one with the werewolves. But the cottage at the nursery had only one bedroom. I hadn't built it to entertain guests. "Are you planning on going back to your hotel?" I asked. "That doesn't sound like a very good idea, does it?" she replied. She surveyed the nursery, turning in her chair to look around. "This place is protected, isn't it?" "Yes, I have wards set and a fairy nest is established here. I was curious as to why they didn't react to you. Normally they throw a fit when a paranormal attempts to enter the grounds." "I guess I'm not a paranormal," Isabella said with a chuckle. "Would you mind if I stay here?" "Well, I'm really not set up for company," I started. A smile spread on her face. "It's summer and I'd be quite comfortable sleeping in one of your oak trees. If you don't mind, I'll be discreet." An image of a jaguar lying on a tree branch came to mind. I wasn't sure if the image came from a picture or maybe a TV show, or if it was something Isabella did. "Yeah, sure, that will work." I pointed to the tree closest to us behind the cottage. "This one is probably the best. That's a public park on the other side of the fence, and there are a lot of pixies over there. Between the pixies outside and the fairies inside, I don't worry about anyone sneaking up on me." "Thank you. Do you suppose I could talk you into a ride to the hotel so that I can get my things and check out?" We drove down to the Willard, which was a stone's throw from the White House. Obviously, Dr. Cortez wasn't hurting for money, but it seemed a little strange to move from a 5-star hotel into a tree. I had never actually been inside the hotel before. The ornate lobby and plush carpeting covering the floors in the hallway, leading to Isabella's room, were far beyond anything I had ever seen except in a movie. When I travelled, it was always a low-budget affair. Her room was equally impressive, but her luggage, a duffel bag and 2 backpacks, showed hard use. I helped her carry them down to the lobby and stood gawking at my surroundings as she checked out. Outside, while we waited for the valet to retrieve my car, I felt magic. Once that had been a rare occurrence in the Earth realm. Glancing around, I saw a large man standing on the portico above us. He had grey hair, a long grey beard, and he wore a dark suit. It didn't take long to figure out that he was the source of the magic. As soon as he noticed me looking at him, he moved toward us while raising his arms. I sketched a rune and spoke a word. Isabella turned to face me, a frown on her face, then pivoted toward the object of my attention. The mage's power lashed out, lighting the air around Isabella and me in a glow anyone could see. Very showy and very sloppy. Humans near us gasped and backed away. "What the hell?" Isabella gasped. Then her eyes narrowed as she focused on the mage. She started to step in his direction, but I reached out and grabbed her arm. "Stay here," I said. "As long as you stay inside my ward, he can't hurt us." The mage threw a second spell at us with a crash of thunder. People ran screaming in all directions. "Are you sure?" Isabella shouted in my ear. "Absolutely," I said in a normal, conversation-level voice. Her eyes widened. "I thought you said you aren't a mage," she said, her voice much softer. "I'm not. An elven battle mage would wipe this guy from both reality and memory, but I don't need a warrior to protect myself. I didn't tell her that the mage's attack wasn't nearly as fierce as it appeared. He wasn't trying to harm us, only capture us. I considered if there was anything I could do to capture him. Isabella stared at me for a few moments, then turned her attention back to the mage, who was attacking us. "You asked earlier about Abner Wilcox," Isabella said. "That is Abner Wilcox." "Why is he being so nasty?" I asked. "And who in the hell is he? I mean, besides being Abner Wilcox. What's an Abner Wilcox?" The mage stood less than 10 feet in front of us, and I was sure he could hear our conversation. He turned so red in the face that I was afraid he might have a stroke. "A mage and anthropologist," Isabella replied. "Dr. Abner Wilcox, Ph.D., University of Chicago. An academic rival to Carlton Weber, the man who looted the statue from Palenque." "Why are there so many professors involved with this blood magic artifact?" I asked. "Are all you people crazy?" Isabella surprised me by laughing out loud. "Yes, I guess we are. Abner," she called to him. "You're making a fool of yourself, and if you don't stop scaring this young lady, she's likely to kill you the first chance she gets, assuming I don't get to you first. Don't you think you should cut your losses before the police and the PCU get here?" He snarled at us. "This isn't over." Isabella snarled back, and he wet his pants. I almost wet my pants. The lady was spectacularly intimidating when she wanted to be. Dr. Abner Wilcox turned and ran. Looking around, I saw my car idling next to the curb. The valets had fled, along with everyone else. Picking up Isabella's duffel bag, I dissolved the ward around us and said, "Shall we go before the police and the PCU get here?" "Absolutely," she said, slinging the smaller backpack over her shoulder and picking up the larger one. I opened the trunk, we threw her luggage inside, then jumped in the car. As we pulled away, we could hear sirens. We unloaded Isabella's luggage and put it in the laundry room of my cottage. Then I said, "I've been in this realm about 70 years, but I haven't had much interaction with your magic users. Is this Dr. Wilcox considered to be competent?" Isabella laughed. "Actually, he is fairly well known, both as an academic and as a mage. I take it that you weren't impressed. That was a pretty loud spell he used to try and break my protection, and it didn't do anything at all. My friend Carolyn was much stronger than he is, and she didn't go around calling herself a master magician." "Really? Maybe she could help us find the statue," Isabella said. No, that isn't possible. She died a few years ago." I showed Isabella the bathroom and the laundry, which was a room off the business office. She seemed very interested in the grounds and expressed surprise at the pond, which covered almost an acre. "I'm rather amazed that you have such a large lake here," Isabella said. "It allows me to grow aquatic plants," I told her. "A lot of my clients want koi ponds or waterfalls. I can raise my own plants instead of buying them, and I can experiment with varieties to find those that do best in this climate." "Where does the water come from?" she asked. I chuckled. "They drained a swamp to build Washington, D.C. It didn't take much effort to find an underground spring and redirect it to surface here. My water bills are non-existent." "I just can't get over what you've got here," Isabella said. "Right in the middle of the city." She gestured toward one of the oak trees. "Those trees at the four corners of your property. What was here before?" "Vacant land. It's not exactly in the middle of the city, more like on the edge. Or it was when I bought the place from a developer. He planned to build houses here, but he ran into money difficulties. I planted the oaks." She frowned. "I would have sworn those trees were hundreds of years old. They're huge." "Elven magic," I said, and grinned at her. "They provide very solid anchors for my wards." Isabella craned her neck as she looked up at the oak nearest to us. "You said you came here 70 years ago, but you bought the place 56 years ago." "I arrived in Germany. From there, I made my way to England and Ireland, then to New York. I spoke German with an Elvish accent and English with a German accent. In the late 40s, a great many people were uprooted without papers to prove who they were. I worked and saved my money, You know, for a large city, this one is more transient than anywhere else. The government changes on a regular basis. People move away, people move in. I've redesigned the landscaping at one house near Rock Creek Park 7 times for 7 different residents. And being transient, people don't notice how permanent you are, Isabella said. I don't encourage close friendships. Probably the closest people to me are those who work for me. There are other elves in the world. I shrugged. Now there are. Up until 2 years ago, there were very few of us. Those in Iceland and Colorado and New Zealand came from Alfheim. The Irish elves came from Midgard. Most are noble refugees with their families and servants. I'm not of the nobility, and I have no desire to become a servant. Refugees? Yes, there's a war in Alfheim, and I suppose in Midgard as well. I've seen war, and I don't wish to see it again. I got excited when a lot of elves came to this realm, but I've been here so long. I don't really have much in common with them anymore. That evening, I watched Isabella change. The air rippled and a jaguar stood where a woman had been a moment before. She climbed my oak as easily as I would climb the 3 steps to my porch. She disappeared into the foliage, her rosettes breaking up her outline and providing camouflage. I sighed and went inside the cottage, poured myself a glass of wine, took a long hot bath, and went to bed. Chapter 5. The next morning, I dropped Isabella off at a rental car agency, then went out to a prospective client's house in Fairfax County. It was a newly built home with a lot of dirt, and judging from the size of the place, the client had a lot of money. I spent the morning brainstorming ideas with the lady of the house and told her I would email her some mock-ups in a couple of days. I stopped by a cafe for lunch and planned on going by the new client in Chevy Chase for final approval of the plans and mock-ups I'd done for her. That's when my phone rang, and all of my plans for the day went to hell in the proverbial handbasket. "Kelana!" Abby Collins, one of the girls who worked for me, practically screamed in my ear. "Someone stole Sam!" "Quieter," I said. "What do you mean someone stole Sam?" Samantha Watson, or simply Sam, also worked for me. The 2 women and 3 men formed a crew that had gone out to Bethesda that morning to do routine maintenance at 2 office complexes. "They kidnapped her. Josh tried to stop them and they beat him up." Abby was clearly upset and half crying. "Where are you?" "Milton Corporation." "Has anyone called the cops?" I asked. "Yeah, Tommy is calling them. I think Josh needs to go to the hospital. Oh my God, Kelana, he's bleeding. They beat the holy shit out of him. Why? Why did they do that?" Abby tried to stay calm. What did the men who kidnapped Sam look like? "Big guys. Business suits. They were driving the weirdest car. A black Mercedes with a pink interior." I closed my eyes and tried to think. And then it hit me. Sam had been so proud when she showed up at work with green hair a few days before. The same shade of green as mine. She was also tall, though not nearly as tall as I was, and naturally blonde and fair-skinned. "We'll find her, Abby. You guys take care of Josh and cooperate with the police, okay? I have to make some calls." I hung up and called Isabella. As soon as she answered, I said, "Those damn werewolves that were stalking me kidnapped one of my employees and beat up another. I need to have a little talk with a guy named Harold Vance, and I need some backup." "Who's Harold Vance?" "He's a werewolf syndicate bigwig." "Crap, where do you want me to meet you?" "At the nursery." I called Maureen and Ed to let them know what had happened. Maureen said she'd take care of Josh and the hospital. I sent Ed to Milton to take care of the rest of the crew. Then I stopped by the Georgetown house to change clothes and add a few wolfsbane paintballs to my arsenal. Isabella was waiting for me when I pulled into the nursery. We left the car and took one of the service trucks. If I had to run into anything, I wanted solid steel bumpers, not the plastic things on my Honda. "Why do you think they kidnapped her?" Isabella asked as I negotiated traffic on our way to the Beltway. She dyed her hair green. "Oh, obviously not the correct fashion decision." "No, but she couldn't have known it would make her a target, and I didn't even think about it. I was just happy when punk rockers started using colours in the 80s and I could stop dyeing my hair." "So, where are we going?" I was still thinking about that. Vance owned a number of businesses and was reputed to run them all from a strip joint in Largo, outside of the district near the football stadium. His home was closer, an estate-sized place in North Silver Spring. "How much do you know about werewolves?" I asked Isabella. Would a were be at his strip club business in the middle of the day or at his home, frisking around the swimming pool with his harem? Interesting question. Which one is closer? His home? She shrugged. Let's go there first. If he isn't there, then we haven't lost any time. Do you know where it is? I grinned. I have a contract to do the grounds maintenance. I probably won't after today, but I know the setup like the back of my hand. While we drove, I filled Isabella in. Vance's place covered about 2.5 acres, surrounded by a 10-foot brick wall. About an acre was covered in forest, the rest was mostly lawn. The area around DC was overrun with deer, and Vance had a gate in the back wall that he usually left open to encourage the deer to come inside the wall, where he and his pack usually ate them. "Is 10 feet too high for you?" I asked. She laughed. "Not at all. You? Not a problem." I parked down the road from Vance's front gate, which was open. I could see a couple of men through the window of a small gatehouse just inside the wall. I didn't intend to go through the gate, though. Isabella watched me load my 2 paintball guns and strap on my sword. "What's in the paintballs?" she asked. "A sleepy gas spell in the red ones. The silver ones are a wolfsbane potion. Lethal to humans as well as wolves if they ingest it. The potion is geared toward werewolves, though." For the first time, I wondered if Isabella could be harmed. Common wisdom was that gods and archdemons were immortal. "Can you be killed?" "I don't know. I assume so," she answered with a lopsided grin. "But no one has managed it yet." "I definitely bleed and hurt, and I wouldn't want to try your little potion. But if we can talk the locals into shifting instead of using guns, then I'll be just fine." The way she said "just fine" made me shiver a little, and I remembered the wares in the alley the night we met. We walked up to the wall, about 50 yards from the road. I hopped up top of the wall and looked around. A jaguar landed next to me, but stayed only a few seconds before leaping to the ground below. A number of people and wolves lounged around the pool in the back of the house 50 yards away. Several children and puppies splashed in the water. I didn't see Vance, but I did see his wife lying on a lawn chair in a bikini. For a brief moment, I wondered if werewolves got skin cancer. I took my bow out of my bag, slung the quiver over my shoulder, and pulled an arrow from it. I wanted to get their attention, but not hurt anyone. I finally found a target, drew, and loosed. The arrow made a satisfyingly loud thunk as its head buried itself in the beer cooler. All sound ceased. Everyone looked around, trying to figure out where the arrow came from. Then one of the kids shouted and pointed at me. My second arrow broke a glass sitting on a table next to Vance's wife. Things got very quiet again. "I'm looking for Harold Vance," I yelled. "He kidnapped one of my employees and I want her back. Tell him I'm out here." Several of the wolves started in my direction, and I saw several of the people began to shift. One man pulled a pistol from a shoulder holster. My third arrow hit him below the collarbone, just inside the point of his shoulder. The pistol clattered onto the ground. Everyone was staring at me, but about that time the first wolf realised that a large cat was standing in his way. He barked. Isabella roared. All the children started crying, and all the puppies either hid under something or ran in the opposite direction. The adult wolves froze. "Where is Harold Vance?" I shouted. "He's not here," his wife shouted back. My fourth arrow impaled the cushion of the chair between her legs. "That wasn't what I asked." She stared at the arrow quivering in front of her. Her mouth worked, but only a croak and an incoherent whimper emerged. "He's at the club," a man called. "Tell him to stay right there," I said. "And tell him if he hurts the girl, I'm coming back here when I've finished with him." Isabella leaped to the top of the wall, turned, and let out another roar. We jumped down from the wall and sprinted toward the pickup. I felt a faint sense of regret that I hadn't recovered my arrows. It took almost a day to make each one. When we reached the truck, Isabella changed to her human form, then opened the door and jumped in. I started the engine and whipped a U-turn. "They'll be waiting for us," Isabella said. "And if Vance has any sense, Samantha will be waiting for us outside his club," I said, then sighed. Probably not. A lot of the wares and vampires were born here. Their ancestors crossed through the veil centuries ago, and their children have no sense of history. Her brow furrowed, and she gave me a searching look. "I'm not sure I get your point. Until a couple of thousand years ago, elves used the realms near Earth, among them Transvaal and Ware, as sport hunting grounds. We've become a bit more civilised since then, but people who grew up in those realms would be far less likely to piss off an elf. Humans inhabited almost all the realms. I had grown up with them in Midgard, so I knew their limitations and their strengths. But the wares and vampires I had met tended to look at humans as prey, which was a dangerous assumption. Humans and elves looked alike and could interbreed, so often non-humans thought of us as a type of human, and therefore a type of prey. That kind of thinking often proved fatal. I parked 4 blocks from Vance's club, the Wolf's Den, and we took to the shadows. I was surprised at Isabella's dexterity and flexibility. She was at least a foot shorter than I was, but she outweighed me. She also kept up with me when I scaled a building, leaped from roof to roof, crossed a highway, and slipped through a grove of trees. From the shelter of the trees we peered across the road to the club sitting at one end of a small strip mall. Next to the strip club was a liquor store, then a sex shop with a peep show, and then a gas station with a convenience store. "I don't see a green-haired girl standing out front," Isabella said. "Yeah, so much for wishful thinking." "So, what's plan B?" "I walk in and get her," I said. "You wait outside, and if it sounds like things are going badly, shift and come in after us." "You're joking." "No, I'm not." I turned toward her. "Look, Isabella, they want me because of my association with you. It makes absolutely no sense for you to go in there." "Yes, but they were willing to kidnap you, and now you're just going to walk in?" I smiled. "I can't cast a glamour on you, but it's something any elf can do to themselves." The light went on, and a smile grew on her face. Donning a glamour that gave me Ed's appearance, I crossed the road. As I pulled the door open, I looked back and saw Isabella trot across the road, angling to the side of the club. When I stepped inside, I released the glamour and shrunk down to my smaller size. Hugging the shadows, I inched my way around the room. A dancer with a bored look on her face strutted around on the stage, accompanied by loud rock music. Fewer than 20 customers sat around a room that could hold 200. A bouncer sat at a table about 20 feet inside the room. He turned toward the door when it opened, but not seeing anyone, he turned back to watch the dancer. Beyond him, a bartender wiped the bar with a towel. He didn't seem to be in a hurry, watching the dancer and not what he was doing. I wasn't much of a judge for such things, but I decided the girl on stage was probably pretty. She had long legs and large breasts. The whole club smelled like the Mercedes, like Doug. The building was 2 stories, but there wasn't any staircase that I could see. Edging my way along the wall, I set my sights on a door at the back of the room with an employees-only sign on it. As I made my way forward, I noticed that all of the customers were keeping one eye on the front door. The bouncer and the bartender were also a lot more alert than they appeared at first. I wished that I'd set up a better signal for Isabella to crash the party. Too late. Technology such as cell phones didn't work well when magic was twisting reality, and my shrinking and glamour were definitely not part of Earth's normal reality. It took me about 10 minutes to reach the back door, then I turned to face the room. No one appeared to be looking at me. I grew back to my full size, drew the paintball gun with a sleepy gas, and I fired 5 paintballs into the room. Twisting the doorknob, I backed through the doorway and closed the door. I found myself in a short hallway with a door on either side. A small, empty office showed through one open door. The other doorway opened into what looked like a break room and a changing room for the dancers. At the end of the hall was a stairway leading up. When I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked up, I saw a closed door with 2 thugs standing outside. One of them opened his mouth and I fired another red ball at the door. Both thugs sank to the floor as the pink mist engulfed them. I waited until the mist settled, then climbed the stairs to the door. The knob moved when I twisted it, so I pushed the door open. Vance sat behind a large desk, and 6 of his men stood around the room. One more sat next to Sam on a couch. She looked a little dishevelled and sported what would probably turn into a black eye. I saw red.
"Ah, Miss Rogier's daughter," Harold Vance said. "I'm so glad you could join us. It seems my men mistook."
It took me only 2 steps to reach him, so he didn't get to finish the little speech he had evidently rehearsed. My left hand clutched his throat, pulled him from his chair, and slammed him against the wall. My right hand drew my sword. The werewolves were slower. Only about half of them had their guns drawn when Vance hit the wall. "If you ever touch one of my employees again," I said through gritted teeth, "I will be carrying your wife's head when I come to talk with you." His eyes widened in fear. "Tell your men to drop their guns. Now." I can hear the click of a trigger. "And I'll be gone by the time a bullet gets here, but you won't be." His voice sounded a little strangled as he said, "Drop your guns, do it now." I counted 6 objects hit the floor. I knew there was a man to my left, and I hadn't heard a thump from that direction. With a long step pivot off my left foot, I swung around and my sword took off the wearer's arm between his wrist and his elbow. The clatter of a pistol hitting the floor sounded as I swung back. "Sam, are you okay?" I asked.
"Yeah, I guess so."
"Which guys beat up you and Josh?" She pointed to the 2 men who had staked out my house in Georgetown. "Stand up and go downstairs and out the front door," I told her. "My friend Isabella is waiting there for you. Tell her that if I'm not back in 10 minutes to come and get me."
"Okay,"
she said, standing and walking to the door.
"Thanks, Kalana."
Her voice broke a little, then I heard her steps on the stairs. "Now," I said to Vance, "you and I are going to go somewhere private and talk. Your thugs are going to stay here, understand?" He nodded. I grabbed him by the hair and pushed him in front of me toward the door. As I passed the 2 wares Sam had pointed out, I swung my sword and disemboweled one, then took the head of the other on the backswing. I heard a gasp from more than one of the remaining wares. Vance stopped and stared at the men I had killed. The headless one toppled, and the other dropped to his knees, his hands clutching his belly, trying to keep his intestines from spilling out on the floor. I prodded Vance in the butt with the point of my sword, and he hopped toward the door. "Where's an empty room?" "Down here," he said, indicating a room at the end of the hall. I put the sword point between his shoulder blades. "Lead on." The room was empty. From the rumpled covers on the bed, I assumed it was the place where he bedded his dancers. I pushed him toward a chair and told him to sit. "So," I said, leaning against a wall with my sword point resting on the floor, "you wanted to talk with me. Now's your chance. Talk." He stammered around until the last thin thread of my patience snapped. "You're looking for a statue," I said. "Why? You can't use it." Vance squirmed and looked uncomfortable. "Do you even know what it is?" I asked. From his face, I could tell that he hadn't a clue. "You idiot. Who's the maid who paid you to steal it?" I laid the blade of my sword across the back of his hand. His skin sizzled like bacon, and he tried to jump back, but the chair was backed against a wall. "Mr. Vance, I'm not a cruel person. I would prefer to go about my business and not have anything to do with you or blood mages. But you have attacked me and people under my protection. Unless you cooperate with me, I shall be forced to conclude that you are the source of my problems. And if I can solve my problems by removing you from this reality, I shall do so." "My pack would avenge me," he snarled. "You are assuming there will be a pack tomorrow morning." The shock in his eyes told me I was finally getting through to him. "You aren't powerful enough to take on 300 werewolves." I smiled. "You will never know." I could see the outline of a cell phone through the material of his suit. Reaching inside his jacket, I pulled it out and put it in my bag. 7 minutes of silence followed. Right on cue, I heard the roar of a jaguar from downstairs. Vance jumped in his seat, his eyes wide in panic. "My friends have arrived," I said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance, I really despise the slaughter of women and children, no matter what race they're from. But you leave me with no bargaining chips. What am I to tell the demons when they ask who is hiding the statue?" I sighed. "I'm just a small part of all this, and I don't have any control over what those far more powerful than me might do." I turned toward the door. "Karl von Wagner," Vance blurted out. "He offered to pay $1 million for the statue." "And who offered to pay more?" I asked. I didn't believe for a second that Vance would go to all this trouble for $1 million. "Come now, surely you have the bid submitted to Carlton Webber. You got those when you killed him and took his computer." Vance shook his head. "I didn't kill Webber." He took a deep breath. "Akari Nakamura offered $2.5 million. I figured that we could get the bidding higher." "Webber thought that too. Don't assume you can protect yourself better than he did. Just look at what one elf can do, and then think of what might happen if one of the great wizards or a demon decided to twist you. I would advise you to lose interest in that statue." I walked out, calling, "Isabella, I'll be right down." Chapter 6. Sam awaited us in the woods across the street. I put my arm around her and hugged her to me. "You're all right?" I asked, and gently touched the swelling around her eye.
Yeah, I'm okay. How's Josh?"
"I don't know. We're going to go find out."
"Who were those guys?"
"Criminals. I'm so sorry you got mixed up in this. They seem to think I know something, but they're wrong. It's the same group of thugs who tried to kidnap me at the nursery the other morning."
"I picked a good time to dye my hair, didn't I?"
I chuckled. "Your timing isn't that great, but I am flattered."
"Yours isn't dyed, is it?"
I drew away from her a little and scanned her face. Although she was understandably shaken up a little, I saw strength there. She was a survivor. "No, this is my hair. Can you keep a secret?" She nodded. I pulled my hair back so she could see my pointed ear. "I'm not exactly human," I said.
"I kind of figured that out. More human than those goons back there, though,"
Sam replied. I smiled. "Thank you. I do need you to be discreet about what you saw today."
"Not a problem."
"Kalana," she said, the expression on her face very earnest.
"Some people think that all the beings who came across the dimensions are monsters, but most of us don't think that. We know that a lot of you are good. Everyone who works for you knows about the fairies and Fred and Kate. We see you with the plants." She shrugged. "We all know you're from somewhere else."
I called Maureen when we got back to the car. She told me that Josh was sedated. The doctor promised to call her when they judged him ready for visitors. We drove to the nursery where Ed and the rest of Sam's crew were gathered. Special Agent Torbert was there as well. "Miss Rogier's daughter," Torbert said. "I see that you found your missing employee." "Yes, she turned up," I answered. "I'll need to speak with her. We do take kidnapping seriously, and we'll need her cooperation to find the people responsible for this." "That won't be necessary," I said. "The matter has been resolved." He pursed his lips and then frowned. "I thought this might be connected with the incident the other morning." "Are those men who assaulted me still in jail?" I asked. "No, they bailed out." "One of the more stupid practices your society engages in, letting criminals buy their freedom so they can commit more crimes." "I hope you might allow the law to handle this matter," he said. "Agent Torbert, many of the beings who came here from other realms don't respect your laws. If I can't protect my employees, they won't respect me either. I gave you a chance to show me your laws work, but you let a pair of kidnappers go free. As I said, the situation has been resolved." Isabella and I swung by the hospital that evening to see Josh. The doctor told me that Josh had 2 cracked ribs, a mild concussion, and a lot of bruises. They planned to keep him overnight and discharge him the next morning. Sam showed up as we were leaving and declared him a hero. I don't think he noticed when I left. "You impressed Samantha," Isabella told me as we waited for our meal at the steakhouse where we went for dinner. I laughed. "In what way? She barely said hello." Isabella shook her head. "Not at the hospital, at the strip club. When she came out, she said that you were kicking ass and taking names. My face suddenly felt hot. She really said that? The shifter nodded. You surprised me at Vance's estate. I didn't have you pegged as a warrior. Elves don't have the kind of gender divisions humans have here on Earth, I mumbled. We all learn to use weapons and how to hunt when we're growing up. And how to intimidate people? How to assault an enemy castle? My training had been a bit beyond normal, but my father was a retired Queen's Guard. I didn't want to talk about the 5 years I spent walking the realms with Alaric, or what I had to do to survive in Germany. Alaric was a master at running a bluff, and I had a ringside seat for a lot of his schemes. Also for the occasions when his schemes went wrong, and we had to fight our way out. Werewolves are easy due to their pack dominance hierarchy, I said. If Vance had been in his wolf form, I probably would have had a fight on my hands. But all I had to do was overpower one person, and all the rest tucked their tails between their legs. The only alpha at Vance's home was his wife, and she's all looks and dominance, dumb as a brick. I shrugged. A lot of races would simply ascribe it to natural elven arrogance. We naturally assume we are the smartest, strongest, most beautiful people in the room, and that everyone will bow down to us. But we're very modest compared to angels. Isabella snorted. Then she changed the subject. So, what did you learn at Vance's club? More names of people looking for the statue. That doesn't do us any good. I'm beginning to think everyone in town is looking for it. You said that Weber died and his home was ransacked. Were you there? Afterward, I estimate that he'd been dead at least 1, maybe 2 days when I found him. The hard drive had been taken from his computer, and the house looked like a tornado hit it. Whoever searched it was very thorough. The mattresses were cut open, every drawer and closet was emptied, and the refrigerator was dumped out on the floor. Smells? I asked. Isabella gave me a raised eyebrow half-smile. The rotting food was lovely, but if I were to run into the man who killed Weber, I would recognize the scent. When was this? Do you think the police are still hanging around? She shrugged. A couple of weeks ago? Why? You said you can't feel magic. If the statue was under the floor or buried in the backyard, you would have missed it. That would assume the person who killed Weber couldn't feel its magic either. Otherwise, why tear the place apart? I'd still like to see his house, his car, his office, and anywhere else he might have had the statue. Maybe I can pick up some residual. Otherwise, we're blundering around in the dark along with everyone else. Isabella looked thoughtful. Maybe you're right. Look, people are trying to question you and me simply because they think we might know where the statue is. We know that we don't know where it is, so why wander around chasing other people who don't know where it is? She burst out laughing. Okay, let's try something different. We drove to Weber's house near George Washington University and parked 1 street over. The house still had yellow crime scene tape around it. We snuck into the backyard and I forced the door. As soon as we stepped inside, I realised that no one had cleaned the place. The stench of the rotten food from the refrigerator had become almost overpowering. I sketched a rune and spoke a word. The smell of the lilacs bloomed and filled the house. Thank you, Isabella said. Wow, that is a magic I would love to have. We searched through the house and I saw that Isabella hadn't exaggerated. The previous searches had been exceptionally thorough. 2 old trunks in the attic had their contents strewn about without any care at all. The basement, where Weber had his workroom, was a different story. I could feel the remains of spells and wards, along with certain magical artifacts and ingredients. A few things I pocketed. Phoenix feathers were impossible to find on Earth, as was the dragon scale. I wondered where Weber had acquired such items. Some things I found led me to believe Carlton Weber was not a nice man. The only way someone could collect a bottle full of pixie dust was to stuff a pixie in the bottle and wait for it to starve to death. We stepped carefully through the kitchen and through a door into the garage. Weber's SUV practically glowed with residual magic. A powerful object had been transported in that car. The magic, tainted with blood and stinking of demon, threatened to turn my stomach. If that was the statue I smelled, I would recognise it if I got close to it. My face must have shown my feelings.
Do you feel something?
Isabella asked. The car. It transported something that left traces of blood, magic, and demon.
So you wouldn't have a problem identifying the artifact?
No, but I certainly wouldn't want to touch it. With that as a guide, I made a quick circuit of Weber's yard. I don't think the statue was ever here, I told Isabella. It was in the car, but it never made it into the house. I wanted to visit Weber's office, but Isabella suggested that a daytime visit would be more prudent. During the day, there are people everywhere at a university, and no one will notice us. But the office buildings will be deserted at night, and the campus police will be curious. When we got back to the nursery, I found several fairies waiting for me at the cottage. It took me a while to derive the gist of what they were upset about, but I finally figured out that a man with magic had approached the fence from the park and tried the wards. I rewarded them with a piece of chocolate, and they headed off to get drunk. Isabella disappeared up the oak tree, and I went to bed. Chapter 7. Samantha showed up for work on time and told us the doctors were probably going to let Josh go home in the afternoon. She also said her parents were flying in that morning. I told Maureen to find out when their flight was due and drive them to the hospital. After the crews headed out on their assignments, I left Ed in charge at the nursery. Isabella and I drove to George Washington University. Professors' office locations were easily found on the internet. The archaeology department was located in a row of red brick buildings that housed administrative offices, offices for professors and graduate students, laboratories and classrooms. As Isabella predicted, a lot of people were coming and going, and no one gave us a second glance. I knew that I was less noticeable on a college campus than anywhere else on Earth. Weber's office was on the third floor of a building, a bit isolated and quiet compared to the lower floors. I heard someone typing in an office a couple of doors down from his office, but otherwise I couldn't detect anyone's presence. It's rather early, Isabella said in a quiet voice. Can you get through the lock? I grinned. Laying my hand on the electronic keypad, I let magic flow into it. As often happened when I tried to program any kind of electrical device, the keypad went crazy and stopped working. With an audible click, the door unlocked. We stepped inside and closed the door. In contrast to the chaos at Weber's house, it didn't look as though the office had been searched. Passing through a second door, we found Weber's lab. The amount of magic from magical items and residual magic from other items was almost overwhelming, but the stench of blood magic mixed with demon scent managed to seep through everything else. I don't think it's here, I said, but it was. There are a lot of magical artifacts here, however. I began going through drawers and cabinets and closets. I found jewellery, pottery, statuettes, weavings, plus gems and crystals that either stored magic or were magical in themselves. Almost all of them had a feeling of age. Weber's been collecting magically enhanced objects for a long time, I said. It was the focus of his work, Isabella said. He was known in archaeological circles for his emphasis on religion and rituals in ancient cultures. In paranormal and magical circles, he was known for his obsession with magical artifacts. Picking up a pendant with a large moonstone, I asked, "Do I have to leave all this here?" Isabella shrugged. "I don't care. As far as I know, the university is still debating how and whether to incorporate paranormal studies into their curricula. Found something you like?" I held up the pendant. "It has a protection against magic charm." Pointing to a small, rough carved statuette that looked like a pregnant gargoyle, I said, "That thing needs to be thrown in the ocean. It's filthy, and I would hate for anyone to use it." "Any idea what it does?" "Yes, it uses blood magic to kill things, animals and plants. It was created out of jealousy and spite. It's the kind of thing that dark mages with small minds create." "Wonderful," she said. "How do we transport it?" I held up a silk bag that I found. "Put it in here. Try not to touch it directly. We'll drive out to the bay and chuck it overboard." She looked dubious. "It won't hurt the fish or water plants?" "No. It would need to be activated, and salt water will prevent that. It's the kind of simple blood spell that any idiot could perform, but it will sink to the bottom and hopefully be buried in the mud forever. Isabella took the bag and slipped it over the little carving. How old is it? Ancient, thousands of years. When we walked out of the building, Isabella asked, "So, what now?" "We know where it isn't," I said. "Either Weber stashed it somewhere or his killer has it. What else do we know about Weber? Did he own a vacation home or a boat? If he was trying to sell the statue here in Washington, I wouldn't think he'd hide it too far away. But first, we get rid of that hideous fetish." "And where do you plan to do that?" I grinned. "Have you had a chance to sample our wonderful Chesapeake Bay blue crabs?" We took Highway 50 toward Annapolis and then to the Bay Bridge. "How good is your arm?" I asked. When I received a blank look, I clarified. "How well can you throw?" An equally blank look with a bit of a head shake was my answer. "I don't know. Why?" Isabella said. I pulled over at a gas station, filled up the truck, and when we got ready to leave,